My name's David Wilson and I'm a councillor with the City of Melbourne. I'm chair of the Community Services Committee.
What role does a councillor play in local democracy?
A lot of different roles. Of course, councillors are elected by the people and essentially they're elected to represent the people. So it's all about finding out what do the people of Melbourne really want. And that's a fairly difficult task because the people of Melbourne are really a diverse population. There's a lot of young people in the city, and so it's pretty important to find out what young people want in the city. But of course, the city is made up of a lot of business people, a lot of students, people who are living in the city, and increasingly that's true. And sometimes the priorities that those different populations have are really quite different to each other. So it's a matter of listening to the populations and trying to weigh up priorities and needs and so forth, and then a councillor is involved in making policy and providing some funding.
And in an increasingly global world, what role do you think a local council has to play in a young person's life?
It's true that we're increasingly global, but I think everybody realises that it's very important to live locally as well. Global issues, of course, are always worked out in our lives right here. And so in the case of Melbourne, the things that matter globally have great significance right here in the city. Social justice issues, for instance, it's really important to end world poverty. And a part of that poverty situation can be seen right here in Melbourne with homeless people and begging and folk who are marginalised and really doing it tough. So the concerns that we have globally need to be expressed locally as well.
I mean, it's been discussed a lot that there's large cases of democratic disengagement within young people in Australia. What do you see as some of the causes around this?
Yeah, look, that was interesting. When I read that, I first of all, I questioned it. I'm not sure that there is a lot of democratic disengagement. When I talk to young people, I find them quite interested in politics and democracy and in how society runs and so forth. I think I'm refreshed by young people and their desire for involvement, their interest, and also their knowledge on these matters, more so than my own generation. When I was a teenager, perhaps especially, I really wasn't very interested in that sort of thing, and I think that that's actually increased over the years, and I applaud today's generation for that. Having said that, where there is disengagement, I think it's probably a result of a distrust of politicians, distrust of politics as a system, and in fact probably distrust of systems generally speaking, and there's pretty good grounds for that, and I think a lot of room for improvement.
What do you see as the biggest issue facing young people in Australia today?
So many issues come to mind. You know, you talk about ending poverty. That's something that I hear a lot of young people talking about and doing things about. You know, it's fantastic to see the mica challenge, for instance, and the involvement of young people in all of that. It's really good. So putting an end to world poverty is a big issue for young people. Of course, environmental concerns are really top of the list, I think, on just about every young person that I talk to. And again, I'm really refreshed by that because that's been a generational change over the years. Concern about global warming and concern about use of water and concern about trashing our environment and so forth is really good concern, and I think probably that would be right up the top of the list. Bringing it down to every day here in Melbourne, things like alcohol abuse, you know, we're reading a lot about that, and especially how it hits young people, and that must be a concern in the majority of young people's minds. And then I guess my background, psychology and social science, and so coming from that background, the big question of where do I fit in an increasingly global world, where do I as an individual fit, and what can I do, and that's an issue on young people's tongues.
Now, just a question that's probably quite specific to Melbourne. Council House 2, they're the purpose-built eco-friendly office premises that cost about $50 million to build. It's proposed that the sustainability features will pay themselves off over the next 10 years. How does the CH2 actually work?
Yeah, it's an exciting building, and I would encourage any young people who haven't had a tour of the building to get in there and to have a look at it. It's quite amazing, actually, and it's not something that is my expertise, but I'm slowly learning about how the building works. The whole idea is that it's working to be in harmony with the Melbourne environment rather than to sort of combat it, if you like. Solar panels, wind turbines, shower towers, helping to create energy and to cool the building or to warm the building. Such things as use of natural lighting, for instance, low energy computer screens. All of these things have been utilised to maximise the way that the environment works around the building, and so, for instance, maximising available light and shade and so forth. An example of that would be louvers that open and close during the day, depending upon the position of the sun. How's it going to pay for itself? Well, we believe, and it's being proved so far, that the building would be paid off within 10 years by such things as decreasing absenteeism, for instance, because the air is much healthier. And so people don't get sick as much, and so absenteeism is decreased. It also pays for itself, of course, in the decreasing energy use, the water usage, the lower water usage, and such things. So we believe that it will pay itself off in 10 years.
And just a last question, David. If the media are to be believed, Melbourne CBD is a hotbed of violence on the weekends. What's the council doing what are you doing as a council to stop this?
Yeah, look, first of all, the city is not a hotbed of violence. There are some problem spots in the city, and that's important to deal with those. However, I live in the city. I've raised a daughter in the city, and I don't have any problems walking around most of the city most of the time, but there are some hotspots that need to be dealt with. What are we doing about those hotspots? Well, there's three major areas. One is regulation, so we have a look at the planning permits and regulations that we have, and ask questions: do they need to be increased? Do they need to be tightened up? And there are some policies that need to be done. So we've got a draft new policy for licensed premises out there being looked at by the public and by state governments. Then, of course, there's enforcement. We need to enforce the regulations that are there, and we're looking for new people to join the force, so to speak, and we're actually doubling the number of enforcement officers that we have, because we really need to take that seriously. But the third area that's oftentimes not talked about is culture change, and actually just recently it's been talked about a fair bit from the federal government, the Prime Minister, and looking at the change of culture in Australia that's needed. And I think that's a very important discussion, and I've been involved recently discussing with a number of decision makers in the city about how can we change the culture of binge drinking. Alcohol is good in moderation, but when it hits binge drinking and underage drinking, then there's some real problems there. And so we need to understand how to change the culture so that people see that it's not cool just to go out and get absolutely sloshed. It's cool to be self-controlled and to drink alcohol in moderation.
VibeWire.net and Efestival of Ideas would like to thank our major sponsor, Cisco. Our supporters, the Victorian Department of Planning and Community Development and National Youth Week 2008, as well as our panel partners, the City of Melbourne and the Human Rights and Equal Opportunity Commission.